Too much coffee and not enough. You're gonna go right in.
Hey guys, Willow! Wow, look at hair. Did you redo it? It's like really bright today.
No, I just brushed it.
I don't know. Maybe it's the camera. Like,
I think there's more light because Winnipeg is actually having a sunshiny day, so
That's why, because there's sun.
Yeah, it's making me think of MJ from Spider-Man.
Ah, yes.
Mine was that color. I don't know what happened. Like I re-dyed it, and I thought I dyed it the same color, but clearly I did not. So
You know what? Sometimes hair dye is very finicky. Like I've tried last year. I tried dyeing my hair red for the pinup pageant, and it came off like a darker auburn color. I'm like, no, this isn't what I wanted at all.
So today we got two special guests, comic creators of social studies, which I got a peek at the first two issues, and it's not bad. It's like, think of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but in high school.
Oh.
Yeah. So we got.
You shared that with me.
Well, I was going to share it with you. You were just busy doing stuff.
I think well, maybe not, because I fall asleep in the chair. So.
Exactly.
Never
So we
mind.
got Mike and Adam. So how you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
It's real good. Nice to have you guys here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. So not only is Mike an illustrator and all that, you're also a SWAT.
Yep.
Yeah.
Full-time SWAT member in Seattle PD.
Nice. How long have you been doing that?
I've been with the department about 12 years now. I've been on the SWAT team full-time for about a year.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. I wonder, does that give you any ideas for future projects? Maybe an action comic or something?
You know, oddly enough, it's actually given me more ideas for comedy strips than anything.
Now, are you actually allowed to do that, or is that okay?
Absolutely.
Just as long as you change the names of certain characters, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, most of it. I have a few comics and strips I've done that appear around the precincts and get a good laugh, and then some bonehead sends it out to the media, and I got to be careful. But that's about it.
Yeah. So before we hop into social studies, I did want to kind of show off some loot that we picked up. Actually, Nicole's wearing her new Captain Marvel shirt that she got from Funko. And it actually came in a Marvel Collector's Core, so we got the Captain Marvel glow in the dark.
Oh, that's cool.
We
Okay,
got
you
it.
you got it. That's right.
There are a few that I claim, because most of them are his collection of ridiculousness. But
They're going to be sharing custody of it.
this one is mine.
And Nick Fury with Goose.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But
Speaking of Flurkins, mine just walked by.
Yeah, and then because I know this isn't your favorite, but I got the Fantastic Four. Got Human Torch and Mr. Fantastic.
Nice.
I'm telling you, when we move, You better have friends.
You're gonna
I am
need
not
a
moving
room
this
just
again.
for the Funko Pops.
Yeah. And I thought this was really cool. This is a Walgreens exclusive. It's called the Scarlet Spider.
Okay, I'm suddenly seeing why you spent how you spent $500 on stuff.
But
I spent $500 on groceries.
yeah. Now, I've kind
In my
of
defense.
decided that we are going to probably do some kind of monthly giveaway for Funko items and whatever else that we get. And I actually have an actual Scarlet Spider that we are going to do. That's going to be our first giveaway. And I will, as soon as I come up with some kind of cool idea, I will post that on our Facebook page.
Ryan Permisson, you better be listening.
So now let's talk about some social studies here. So how did this all come to be? Where did you guys meet?
You want to field that one, Adam?
Yeah, if you check out our first issue, there's 2 characters and one shows up late to Earth Science. And there's only one seat open in the class, and it's a guy he doesn't know. He sits down and then right away notices that the other guy's been drawing Starcraft characters. And that's exactly how Mike and I met back in 1999. I was late for my first day of social studies in high school. And he was drawing Starcraft, so we had to keep it true. And we kind of just hit it off immediately.
Nice.
Yeah. So was like writing and drawing always something that you guys kind of gravitated to?
Well, Mike's been drawing forever. I don't know what you were like 4 or 5 when you really started.
Probably around 2nd grade, to be honest with you. The first, I started drawing like tracing stuff out of comics and the instructional books that you get with video game cartridges, like Super NES and NES. And I remember the first illustrated story I did was a G.I. Joe story that I was trying to draw like a 5-page story about, and I got in trouble because it was too violent, they said. So I didn't think it was too violent, but it was a weird kind of hippie-ish school, and I got a note attached to my backpack that day. But yeah, ever since then, I just kept with it. It's been so much fun. I love doing it. My pastime. It's kind of my decompression. Come home from work, sit down, throw the TV on, and get some drawing done.
And
what about you, Adam, with writing?
I always liked it, but I never saw it as something, because the what you're told in school is you have to, learn the basics and learn math and then go to college and get a boring job and do all that kind of stuff. So I never did a lot with it. And when Mike and I met, we were drawing comics, but it wasn't so structured. We're like, okay, let's write out a script and plot the story. And in the 3rd act, this happens. We would just kind of like, we had composition notebooks and Bic pens, and we would just draw it as we went. And Mike would draw like 5 pages and pass it off to me, and I'd read it and pass it off to another friend and another friend. And then we'd kind of all put in input, and we'd make jokes, and it was a lot of just inside jokes with our friends. And then we kind of all started to try to mimic Mike's style and do our own versions of that. And then we started to come up with some storylines like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if they did this? But it wasn't until just a few years ago where we weren't really doing a lot with it. It was something we always talked about. And I was taking a lot of courses on like storytelling, screenwriting, creative writing, just in my own time because my day job was so boring. And I was like, I'm going to put together the most competent script I can for these characters and shoot it off to Mike and see what he thinks. And once he read it, he was like, okay, I think we should make a real pass at this. So.
That's cool. So you talk about like screenwriting and stuff. You're a big movie fan. Is that?
Yeah, for sure.
Is that something that you may be inspired to be like a screenwriter for television or even film?
I would love to. My main focus has just been writing this comic. I mean, I have other ideas, but we would love to get this to animation one day. So the way we write it, we kind of write it more like a sitcom than a comic. Like, I don't write panel 1, these characters, they say this happens. I just kind of write a 20 to 22 page TV episode script, and then Mike visualizes it and does the layouts and everything.
That's really cool.
That's cool.
I was thinking that I could totally see this as like an animated feature, like on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon. I mean, it's got the
Ultimately.
right tone. Like I was telling you, it's kind of like Diary of a Wimpy Kid or Captain Underpants. Like it's very humorous, and as they were saying, like real life stuff that kind of you threw in there. So, is there a favorite character that you have in this that's not yourself?
You want to start, Mike?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, so the thing is, the characters themselves aren't necessarily based solely off of a single person. A lot of it is just aspects of my personality, Adam's personality. My older brother's a year older than me, so he and I have been best friends our whole lives, and he was, he's good friends with Adam as well, so we all knew each other. So his personality, other people we hung out with, and we kind of assigned kind of more of the major aspects of certain people's personalities to certain characters, but no one's specifically designed to say like, Lenny is me or Turner is Adam or something like that. But and some of the characters actually what you wish you could be in high school too, like confident and able to talk to people, not shy. I was pretty shy in high school. So when you look at it that way, but if I had to ask who I think my favorite character is, it's still gonna have to be Turner. I always enjoy writing him, drawing him in, and doing his facial expressions, things like that.
What's fun about Turner is he's a goof, but he's also kind of the smartest guy in the room without trying. So he'll come up with like he does a lot of ancient Rome references that are pretty much only funny to me. But then when someone looks it up, it's funny to them, and then we write it in the context of the story where like no one is on his level, no one knows what he's talking about, but he's just in his own world, so he doesn't care.
And being the smartest guy in the room was never me either. So that's
no, me either. That's why it's fun to write him.
Yeah. So do you guys, when you're sitting down and working out, like for the next issue, do you guys already have a plan laid out on where you see these characters going? Like, for instance, with the MCU, Kevin Feige has what they call the 5-year plan. He does his 5 years and then he does another 5 years. So do you guys have kind of a layout for social studies on how you want your story arcs to go?
We do, big time, actually. We have, it's definitely a living document, but we have a huge outline where we have it divided into chapters, and each chapter is a season of the school year. So, like, chapter 1 is fall, because it's the start of the school year, then it goes into winter, spring, summer, and then that'll be their first year of high school, and then in the next 4 chapters for the next year. So we're at least taking our characters through high school. And we don't have a definitive, like, this is the last issue, this is exactly what happens. But we'll come up with a story idea and just plop them into our outline where we think it'll fit based on the characters' relationships. And, if it involves a lot of driving, obviously they're not doing that one while they're 14. So we put it a couple years later, things like that. And it changes a little bit. Like, we'll have scripts written ahead of time. But then there'll be a new character introduced or new character interaction, so we'll have to go and update those things. So no script is ever really done until the comic is printed, but we definitely have a pretty solid plan as to where it's going.
Nice. And I like how you guys have, you deal with issues without, like, hitting people over the head. And those are the best stories to me because, I mean, I love reading comics, but, like, if they have their agenda and it's, like, throwing right in your face, I was like, it turns me off. I like it to be more organic, and I like that you guys have done that.
I really appreciate you saying that because we try really hard to keep it that way.
Yeah, like, dealing, I mean, we all dealt with, like, bullies and all that, and then you have your different stereotypes. You got the jocks, the cheerleaders, the nerds, and all that. And you guys dealt with that in a realistic way, and so I do applaud you for that.
It's funny because, just like Adam said, appreciating the fact that you said that is when he and I are going over stories. That's one of the biggest points we hit. We're like, do we sound too preachy with this? We don't want to sound too preachy with some stuff, and it's probably one of our biggest focuses to make it feel a little bit more organic, like you said. And and we really appreciate you picking
But
up
it
on
helps.
that.
It helps people to feel invited into read
Awesome.
your comic, and like they're not alone in what they're dealing with in high school. We've dealt with it, and it's nice to have that feeling come back at you with a comic book that
Awesome.
Yeah, for
you're
sure.
included.
Good.
Well, and I just speaking out of like I'm making an assumption because that it's always kind of nice to realize that even the popular kids had problems, and it was always nice to know that if your life was falling apart, then there's something that was going on that even Miss Perfect had to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And so you didn't realize that until you got older. Like you thought everything was a cakewalk for them, and then you realized that maybe it wasn't. And so you had a whole new appreciation for it. Like, I mean, I have run across people from high school that now I know why they were the way they were, because now I know.
Yeah.
So
that was one thing we were trying to hit on too, is like, we're obviously telling our story and things like that, but we're, trying not to fill it with inside jokes that's only funny to the two of us. We want people to read this. But one thing that we realize, now that we're adults, is in high school, everyone had the same feeling where every little thing that happened was the end of the world. It was monumental. It was never going to get better. So that's kind of something that we try to touch on and maybe make fun of a little bit, but just kind of in a self-reflective, like, we really overreacted, or, you're going to be fine if this happens to you.
Yep.
Is there something that you haven't touched on already that you want to touch on and maybe put your message out there in a future issue?
Mike, why don't you start? Because we probably have a bunch of ideas like that.
Yeah, there are quite a few, I think. And it's kind of the way Adam hinted at how we have everything laid out, where in the first chapter, they're pretty young. So, they couldn't drive a car. They couldn't do all that kind of stuff. But as we get older, especially going through high school, more and more things kind of start to become more of a big deal. So, early high school, a lot of it's bullying, fitting in, all that kind of stuff. Later in high school, it might be that moral dilemma of, do you want to be the most drunk person at a party just because everyone might think it's the coolest thing ever, right? So we do evolve towards some of those later in your high school career issues. And I think that will be fairly easy to pick out as the time progresses.
And stuff with like relationships and dating and things like that. And just because there's a ton of humor to be mined in that, for one thing, but it's also like, like I know in high school, I had a really hard time walking up to a girl and talking to her. It was like the hardest thing in the world. And looking back, it's like you miss so many opportunities just by not being like, oh, hey, what's up? So, that's kind of stuff we're going to get into because it's fun and light, but it can also have, I don't want to say serious repercussions, but it can be hard developmentally, I guess.
Yeah.
We had some other more funny storylines, like one thing with Turner, he's the smartest guy in the room, but he doesn't really care. What are the long-term repercussions of that when it's time to like apply for college?
Yeah. Yep.
Without giving too much away.
Yeah, Willow, you wanted to say something?
I was just gonna say, like, which one of you spent the most time in the principal's office?
That's a funny thing, actually, because we try to tell the stories balanced too. Like, we don't want our characters to always be squeaky clean and be the hero. They're gonna screw up. They're gonna do things they really should not have done. But
I'm going to say me, though, in real life, though, especially over in Paris.
Oh, in other schools. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So my family moved to Paris, France. That's actually the second half of 10th grade. So that's when Adam and I still had to stay in touch across an ocean. But
oh, wow.
I went to an American school there, and I might have been in the principal's office probably once a week there. I don't know what the problem was, but yeah, we were in trouble a lot.
That's a fair point, because I was going to say, you and I had talked a little while ago where I'm like, they keep doing this stupid stuff and they keep getting away with it. Do we have to get them in trouble more? And you're like, well, we never really got in all that much trouble.
Funny thing is, I never so much as got a detention. I don't know. Maybe I was good at talking myself out of trouble back then. I don't know.
See, when you're new at a school, like I have way too much experience of about being the new kid at the school, and having to deal with a lot of stresses at home and at school. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the principal office, but because I was trying to deal with way too much, and of course I'm gonna do some crazy stuff and have all these weird outbursts. But you know, I feel like. Being the new kid sucked.
I went to 3 different high schools. I was a new student for my senior year of high school. We moved back to Fredericksburg, Virginia. So that, you know, it's restarting every year. And you're right. It's trying to figure out what clique you're going to belong to, who's going to be your buddy for this last year. And I think a lot of the big issue in Paris was just there was a lot of rich kids, and I didn't fit in with them. So, you know, of course, worlds were going to kind of collide there. But it's tough. It's absolutely tough. So
yeah.
So what was your favorite like comics or books that you guys like to read when you were growing up?
For me, Bill Watterson was one of my favorite artists. He did Calvin and Hobbes. I loved, but I was big into the Dark Horse comics, actually, like Aliens, Predator, all that kind of stuff. And I was telling somebody else this story, but my grandmother lived in New York City, and whenever we'd visit her, my uncle who lived there as well had a friend that lived near her, and we called him Uncle Sal, and he lived on the second story of one of the high rises. Every time we'd visit her, we'd go to Uncle Sal's apartment, but we'd stand outside, and Uncle Sal would lower us a bag of comic books that he was done reading. So that's how I first got into Dark Horse, because we'd always go there. We'd get about 50 or 60 comics, and I just loved getting into them and reading them. So those were always my favorites.
Did you read any Spawn since you like Dark Horse?
Oh yeah.
So what drew you to the dark stuff? I mean, because Dark Horse, I mean, Aliens, Predators, but they weren't Marvel and DC.
They were pretty dark, but it was probably more because of the Aliens movies, even though I was absolutely terrified of them as a kid. And I spent most of my childhood under the blanket hoping a face hugger wouldn't pop between the wall and the mattress. I loved them, though. I still loved them no matter what. And when I found all those comics, just adding on to that universe, you know, that you don't get to see beyond the movie, always was like one of my favorite things to read about.
Yeah. What about you, Adam?
I was more into Marvel. I mean, the 90s X-Men comics were great. I still have a ton of them in the closet here. I don't know what to do with. I wasn't big into DC as a kid, except for Batman. And then when I got older, like high school and just after high school, it kind of flipped where I wasn't really reading Marvel, but I was reading a lot of the DC. More currently, I've been keeping up with the Marvel Star Wars stuff they've been doing. I finally just got around to reading Sandman, which, you know, it's shameful how far behind I was on that one. So now I've been trying to read stuff that's more out there. You know, not quite, you know, I don't need to read another Avengers. Not that I'm against it, but I'm just trying to expand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you guys feel like, I mean, they are calling this is like the golden age of like comics in the movies and TV and stuff. When we were growing up, we didn't have all this. I mean, we had like, you know, the 90s X-Men cartoon and the Spider-Man cartoon. But I mean, now it's like you got like Umbrella Academy, The Walking Dead's been on for 10 years. I mean, you got like X-Men movies, and it's just great. Like how do you feel with writing a book like this? And apparently you guys, want future like a Netflix series maybe or something like that. Like you guys kind of feel like you're coming into the industry at the right time?
I would say yes and no. I think yes, because just like you said, they're adapting a lot of these comics into shows and cartoons, things like that. And then on the no side, it's like, well, they're doing it so often. It's like they're going to start getting picky about it and be like, well, it's good, but it's not going to make the cut. So it's nerve wracking on that end. But I mean, hopefully, ultimately, we're able to get something like that going.
There's also a lot of exposure to the characters, like The Walking Dead's been on 10 years, like you said, that's not superheroes. Most of it is superhero-centric, but from what I've been reading anyway, is because you can watch the Avengers movie, the Avengers comic sales are down. Like DC last year had a major restructuring where they, booted a lot of people and things like that. And while we're not exactly the same genre as that, it's I don't want the comic book to be a lost art.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And it's funny because when you mention comic books, most people, always think of like Superman and Batman, but there's like so much, like I brought up The Walking Dead, Umbrella Academy, The Boys on Amazon, which is a fantastic show. Yeah, Nicole just loves Butcher.
Who doesn't?
The only person that can say that word, and I don't find it offensive.
It's the accent.
Yeah. But there's so much out there that's not, spandex and capes. We're finally getting a Sandman series on Netflix that's been in the works for years.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
Well,
I can't imagine Neil Gaiman being easy to work with either for his stuff. So,
well, didn't he write Good Omens?
Yeah,
he did. But like the Sandman, I know for the longest time, Joseph Gordon-Levitt was trying to get Sandman made. So I like that we're seeing different things that are, like I said, not Batman and not Superman and Spider-Man, because there's so much great literature in comics. And Nicole, being a teacher, she's very passionate about like bringing comics into the classroom. And social studies is I think one of those books that could be in a classroom.
Well, when you think about it, like in middle school, like we already have comics that are like Smile and Sisters and things like that. And then, on top of that, we have like the animated, we have a lot of animated now, like novels that have become graphic novels. So we're kind of making that transition into including that. But, our kids struggle so much with reading. It's kind of silly to assume that they're all going to be able to read 100 pages of something without a picture in sight.
No, that's my problem. It still is kind of.
Yeah.
There's no images. I'm like, oh. But
see, I feel like comic books would be like a perfect start to get kids into reading, and then you get them to do like the small novels or like the short stories.
I never understood what was not okay with having the graphic novel or a graphic novel that was comparable to the actual book that you were going to read, and reading them together. Maybe not side by side, but reading, one first and then going into the other and seeing how they parallel each other. Because at least then you have something to go on, and more textbook companies, I'm not going to say that they're not, like more textbook companies are bringing that in as part of their textbooks and things that they can do. But I just know that, I didn't have comics when I was a kid. And while I was a good reader, it might have held my interest a little bit more. Like I might have actually probably had a better vocabulary even. Because I'm sorry, but comic books, they don't dumb anything down. Yeah. They really don't.
I think the idea of introducing them into a classroom as a more mainstream means to get kids reading is an awesome idea, because to be honest, most of my elementary school was in a Catholic school, and comic books you couldn't bring one to class.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, okay, that's not a legit book that you can read. It was, don't bring it into class because you're going to sit there reading it and it's distracting. It's like, oh, okay, well.
Yeah, reading is reading.
I agree.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I know, everybody had 2020 basically ripped Comic Cons away.
Yeah.
But when the world kind of opens back up and cons start happening, do you guys plan on doing like panels and stuff at conventions, and maybe speaking at like libraries and maybe even schools?
Yeah, Absolutely.
It'll probably start more where we just have to buy a table at a con just to try to get our name out there. But we definitely have plans on doing that. I actually do some YouTube stuff for So Wizard podcast, and I've been to some cons with them. So that would be a nice way that I can go and have, some more people that I know there, since me and Mike are on opposite coasts. But one thing we'd really love to do, hopefully we can pull it off, is Emerald City, so I can go out to Seattle and we can do one together.
Normally, I actually sign up for that overtime shift, and I get to be paid to be at the Emerald City Comic Con and walk around. So that's one of my favorite weekends of the year.
But I got to bring up this comic because it's really fun.
I was kind of worried about bringing that up.
That's some serious boredom.
Well, to be honest, before cell phones, I think everybody did.
You got rack of magazines in your bathroom.
Shampoos, anything. I didn't have magazines, and if I'd read through all the Calvin and Hobbes, it was all right. I guess I'll figure out what's in hair gel. I don't know.
So that's like the fifth time you've mentioned Calvin and Hobbes, and I love Calvin and Hobbes, and I know it's beloved, but I think it's not talked about enough. At least
I agree.
Recently.
I agree.
I think it's funny because a lot of people that ever read comic strips, the first comic strips they read were Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes. Like those were the first ones that they read. So why aren't they, people don't even really talk about Peanuts anymore. They want to make movies out of it, but they don't talk about the comic strip anymore.
What I appreciate too about Bill Watterson is he touched on issues that we see very commonly nowadays, but weren't really talked about then. And I think he was so far ahead of his time, calling people out on social issues, that even then I read it, I'm like, that's pretty funny, but I don't see that. And now I'm like, wow, how did he know 25, 30 years later? I'm like, wow, that's still relevant. And that's even more relevant today than it was back then. So
I think that's why it stood the test of time. Like people in our generation, we can read it now, even though we read it 25 years ago, and it has all new meaning and the same meaning at the same time. And he also kept it really pure. Like he didn't over merchandise and all that kind of stuff, which I'm not against Bill Watterson making money, but I think that's also one of the things, like he never let anyone else get their hands in there.
There was a comic book, well, it still is around, Bloom County, that I love reading every now and then. And I used to love it as a kid, but never really understood some of the jokes. But now it's like, holy crap!
Now I get it.
Yeah. And Willow, I know that you're a fan of Earthworm Jim.
Oh my God, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of have, it's funny. I watch the guy, the artist streams
Doug Tenenbaum,
whenever I can. Yes.
I love his style of art.
He is incredible, and I have to get enough gall to get him on the show and interview him. If you want to see me fangirl, that's the perfect person to do it with.
I wouldn't even know what to ask him. I'd just be fanboying out the whole time.
I used to laugh when people would say that, and then I met somebody like that I loved when I was a kid, and I'm like 35 years old. I don't know what the hell I'm gonna say. I walk up. I have nothing. I'm just gonna stand here. Like I had nothing to like. I couldn't ask questions. I lost all ability to think. I was like, what is wrong with me? I'm an intelligent human. Why can't I have a conversation with this other intelligent human that just happens to be on TV?
Yeah, and like, you melted into a puddle of water.
Like,
and that person was Dean Cain. So
I said, I'm so sorry, but the 15-year-old me is screaming inside right now, and I know nothing about what I'm going to say to you right now.
Well, I touched
Dean Cain probably gets that a lot.
I touched on earlier how much of a fangirl I am and was when I saw Tia Carrera.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty.
I think we all have that person. We're just like, I
yeah.
Although I think I have more than one, because like my in to see Tyler Hoechlin was literally the phone, where I Facebook called my friend that I went to high school with and said, "Hey, so my friend that I went to high school with did the makeup on your show," and I'm like, he's like, "Dude, call him," and I'm like, "Okay," and he sat there for 15 minutes talking on my phone, which was good because I didn't have anything to say. I was like, again, so.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, we were at MegaCon Orlando. That was in 2019, and her high school friend is Eric Porn, who did the effects for Teen Wolf on MTV. And so we were in the line there, and you were talking to Eric on Facebook. You're like, "Yo, I'm about to name drop you," and then so. She goes up to Tyler and she goes, "Yeah, I'm, friends with Eric Porn." He's like, "Porn?"
And lost his mind, and I said, "Do you want to talk to him?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then and I said, "Well, I can Facebook call him because I don't have his cell number." And I said, "But I can Facebook call him." And he's like, "Do it. What are you waiting for?" And I'm like, "Okay."
And then she lost her phone for like 15 minutes.
I was like, "Right on." And I didn't even get anything out of it other than the fact that I watched him hold on to my phone for 15 minutes.
And they were setting up some kind of party when they got back to LA.
Yeah, they were like, "We get back into town." I was like,
I wish I could say I had more positive interactions with celebrities, but my closest claim to fame is I had to arrest Cat Williams a couple of years ago. That's about it.
Oh.
Everybody at the station was starstruck. I wasn't too thrilled with it, but it happens.
So, is there a comic book artist or writer that you would love to meet at a Comic-Con?
Go ahead, Adam.
I don't know. I try not to do too close to home. You know what I mean? Like someone asked me before, what am I reading now that I'm writing? And I'm like, well, I don't want to read any humor comics because I don't want to accidentally take something. So I'm afraid if there's somebody who I'm looking up to as a writer and then I meet them, I'm either going to realize that they're a jerk and then not like their writing anymore, or accidentally steal something from them and then kind of make a jerk out of myself. So I try to walk that weird line.
Now I'm going to have to actually agree with Willow. I think if I had a chance, I would love to meet Doug Tenenbaum. I think that would be awesome. Just love that style and everything hand drawn the way he does it. It's unreal.
He's such a down to earth guy when he's streaming, and it's like, I could definitely get into talking to him about stuff. But
you can have an actual conversation with him.
Get me in the room with him. I'll probably go stupid.
That's how Stan Lee was when he wasn't being handled, because his handlers were the ones that were the jerks. Stan Lee was super nice, and he would talk forever if he could, but his handlers are always like, "No, we gotta go.
Really, like we've not met a ton of celebrities, but like when we meet somebody and it's an honest interaction where you're enjoying them and they're there to be there to like really have fun with the fans. Like when we're at MegaCon, we got our picture taken with
Ming Na,
and she like greeted us in and talked to us while our picture was being taken, and then she was still talking to us when they were ushering us out. And she's like, "Well, I love all the things." She's like, "Come visit me at my table."
See, that's how it should be.
Yeah. Michael Hooker was the same way.
Oh, Michael Hooker
was
is
amazing.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah, I've heard he's a nice guy. Yeah.
And it was hilarious because we bought chocolate covered pretzels. Because we were like, this is how much of a fan we are. So we took him chocolate covered pretzels, and our son was like, "I want to give it to him," and I'm like, "You're 5, you don't know what this means," but
get out of
here. And he's like, "These are for you," and he looked at him, he took them from him, and and then he looked at us, and he was like, and he started to laugh. So it was like, I think it's nice when you can have a conversation with another person on a human level, or that's interested in something that you did. Like I met Chris Claremont, and while he's an amazingly smart person and a really great author, he wasn't fun to talk to.
Mm.
And I'm like, you just consistently told me that I was wrong in how I taught your comic book in my classroom. Thank you. Like,
Wow.
man.
Yeah. It's
Like-
one of those things, like, be afraid to meet your heroes.
Yeah, like unfortunately I had like a quick meet up with Adam West, and like he wasn't very responsive, which I understand. It was Friday night of the con. He had just shown up and he was probably jet lagged, but meeting the woman who played Catwoman just blew my mind. Just I can listen to any of these celebrities, they talk for hours, but with Julie Newmar, she was just like commenting about my costume and just like, oh, I wish I had this and blah blah blah, and I'm just like, talk some more.
You must have caught Adam West on a bad day, because I've only ever heard how he was such a nice, responsive guy. But, everybody can be tired or agitated or whatever. You don't know the circumstance. I mean, not that I know the guy personally, but
I think one of the coolest people that we met was Manu Bennett.
Oh,
Nice.
oh, okay, yeah.
We met him when Nicole was pregnant, and then a few years later we met him again, and he remembered.
Oh wow!
It was funny. He goes, he says, "Well, what are you going to name him?" Because I was close to being due. This was in May, and I was due in June. And I said, "Well, his name is going to be Oliver." And he goes, "You're going to let him fail the city? Like, what are you doing?" And I laughed. And then a couple of years later, he was back at the show again, and we went back. And he looked at me, and he was like. And I said, well, you've met us before. And I said, but I wanted to let you know that I was pregnant then. And I said, this is Oliver. And he was like, oh my God. I do remember you.
And then he looked at Oliver and he's like, you did not fail this
He said,
city.
you have not failed it.
Because Oliver has these big blue eyes. And yeah.
Well, and if you met Oliver, it's like, he's very much a Gemini child, but he is very personable when you meet him. He is very, friendly and sweet and wonderful.
Yeah, but Manu was super awesome. He's kind of like the way that Norman Reedus is when he has a long line. Even if they shut the lights off, at the end of the day, he will autograph everyone that's in the line.
Oh, awesome.
Wow.
That's good.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Willow.
No, just was going to make one more comment. Aaron Ashmore is really fun to talk to as well. At a convention, caught him a couple times at our local one, and even walking around with him during the convention was actually pretty fun too.
He seems like he'd be really cool.
Yeah. So, do you want to see your comics in the comic shops on the shelf someday?
Absolutely. I haven't really been able to wrap my head around trying to get into the logistics of how we're going to do that. When comic shops are open and we're allowed to go places again, I'll probably go to like the local ones here and knock on the door and be like, hey, can we do anything? Beyond that, I'm not really sure what path. We're just trying to get people to read it at this point. I mean, not saying that nobody has, the more eyes on it, the better. We did get on Comixology, which was pretty cool. So that should help get a lot of eyes on.
Oh yeah, that's good. Especially now that Amazon took over that, it's a lot more looking at it. With the comic shops, especially, we have a lot of local ones. Well, not local, really. I mean, we have to drive to Tampa or Orlando, but a lot of them love independent comics. They even have a whole independent section. And usually when people come in, instead of, going, here's Marvel, here's DC, here's local independent artists and writers. So try to find a local shop that is very independent friendly.
That's a good idea. That would be really cool because just the way Mike's art style is, he's not copying anybody. It's not going to blend in when you're walking down, and we try to make the colors pop. And we're really inspired by the 90s cartoons where everything was really big and in your face.
Hey, Grant.
We're, yes, Grant is a fellow comic creator himself, based
awesome.
out of Philly. So,
cool.
Yeah, and New York City is not too far from me, so I was thinking again when things are open, go down there with a copy of whatever issues we have out, and be like, hey, do you have a spot I could get more printed and send them down?
That's really cool. So
I wonder sometimes though if just the nature of the climate we live in now hasn't made it easier for people that are independently published to be able to put their work out there. Like a lot of people are just like, sure, and they put on their shelves because they're excited to have something new that people might be interested in coming to their shop to see. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of nice to know that some people are in it for creators and creators alike.
Dad.
Yeah, the internet's definitely.
You need to sign in.
The internet definitely opens a lot of opportunities. It's making a comic book is definitely a labor of love because it's so time intensive and everything. And we do love doing it. We have a lot of fun. Like Mike said, he gets home from a long day at work, he draws. I do the same thing. Like I work all day and then I sit down in front of TV and I work on the coloring because it's therapeutic. It's just so hard to market. I'm really bad at marketing.
Yeah, same here.
That's probably the hardest part about anything, I think, when you create it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a ton of ideas up in my head, but that doesn't mean that I've been able to make any of it happen.
So I got a question here for you, Mike, and it's going to be a tough one. So growing up in the 90s, we had all these cool cartoons. So if I had to say you can keep one, you can save one, and you got to get rid of one, Batman the Animated Series, X-Men the Animated Series, or Justice League?
I'm going to keep Batman, and I'm going to get rid of the X-Men. I don't know. I'm sorry. X-Men
I can't be friends with you.
Thing. I'm sorry. It was just never. It was. I didn't like. It's not that I didn't like them. I just never got fully into it as much as everybody else did. But I always liked the Batman series.
Right.
Now, what about you, Adam? Did you have a favorite animated series growing up, comic book or?
Growing up, I actually watched the X-Men obsessively. But now, if you ask me that same question, I would have to save Batman the Animated Series, and I would get rid of the Justice League just because I never watched it. But that Batman Animated Series really, they took it serious. It wasn't like, oh, we're making a show for kids, whatever. Like they made a beautiful thing, and they revolutionized how it was done, and they had the big orchestral score, and then you get Mark Hamill as the Joker and Kevin Conroy as Batman. It's like those are the quintessential voices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the Danny Elfman music just fit right in there.
Yeah, and it's like a legit, insanely good composer. Like they really took it serious. And the show debuted in prime time.
It felt like a continuation of the '89 Batman in a way.
Yeah, and they also did the cool thing with the Zeppelins and the weird card designs, where it didn't set it at any point in history. Mm-hmm. It was like retro future.
Cool. So, Mike, you are a Starcraft fan. Are you a Warcraft fan as well, or?
Yeah, I'm horrible at both games, but I've always liked them. Yeah, it's just kind of that style that Starcraft has, and it's very reminiscent of me too, as like a big Warhammer fan as well. So the Zerg designs, the Tyranids in Warhammer, I've always liked that, and it also kind of looks a lot like the Xenomorphs from Aliens too. So that style of, the dark, scary future, not the bright, everything's shiny, everyone's wearing like a perfectly unstained white spacesuit. It's like, dark, creepy corridors with steam blowing out in pipes, and you don't know what's coming around the corner. I've always loved that style of future, that sci-fi. That's kind of where I'm going at with it. But definitely a huge fan of that stuff.
Did you play D&D?
A little bit. Again, I was just, it was more finding the time to, and I kind of was an ADD child, so I'd, see something shiny and end up losing attention. But my brother-in-law plays it now, and I'm trying to get in on a game with him one of these days because I still love that stuff.
Yeah. What about you, Adam?
I haven't played Starcraft in a while just because I don't have a computer for it at this point. I have a Mac because it's better for doing the comic, and that's why I prioritize. I still play a lot of video games, Xbox and stuff. I was never big into D&D. Just recently, because of the pandemic, we tried, but after like 3-4 weeks, we'd all still get on, but we would just talk. We wouldn't actually get into it. But that's kind of the whole point anyway, is just to get together with people and hang out.
Yeah. So if someone came across you guys and they're like, well, what is social studies? What would the best way to describe it? If you had it like what do they call it? Elevator pitch.
Elevator pitch.
Do you want
Adam,
to do
I think
yours?
you had the better one earlier.
It's been evolving, so I got to try to remember how to keep it concise in my head. It's the high school experience that we're trying to capture, done through the skewed prism of the 90s cartoons we grew up on. I think that's like the log line, I guess would be the term.
That's not bad. I like that.
I think Adam kind of summed it up with the best. I kind of drone on too long, so I don't think I'm even capable of an elevator pitch. But hold on, I'm going to stop the elevator because I got something to tell you.
It's part like, here's our actual high school experiences. Here is how we wish things had gone. Here's a funnier version of things. And here's what we wish we could tell ourselves at 14 years old. So it's kind of all of that together at different times.
Look at this artwork. This artwork is awesome.
I love it.
Thank you.
It kind of reminds me of several different cartoons from early 2000 and just that
Like
great.
the Nickelodeon stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, see,
Like Recess, Doug.
oh yes, I'm so glad you brought that up because those are exactly what we were going for. Like, those were my favorite shows growing up. Doug, Rocko's Modern Life, Recess, all that stuff. I loved it. So that's where a lot of the inspiration for the characters and style came from for me.
It's always fun hearing the cartoons people see in it.
Yeah.
I am kind of like the 90s cartoon aficionado. I watch TV relentlessly. And
All right, see, we can be friends. Just because the X-Men thing, that doesn't mean we can't be buddies.
Yeah, everyone has Nicktoons.
That's cool. I know we have a digital copy of the issues, but I want an actual physical copy. Like I'm a physical guy.
Yeah.
We all know where her mind went.
And that's why
Anyways,
you have a son,
that's
I
for
guess.
the after dark
Sorry. My lens is clouded by a bunch of 13-year-olds I teach on a daily basis.
Hey,
Like, even when
it's usually me whose mind goes into the gutter the first thing. So
My students will say to me, "We didn't even think it like that." Miss Jobin, you're wrong.
Willow
That's
knew
just
what I
wrong.
meant. Like,
yes.
I knew what you meant too. I found it, but I don't know.
like when it comes to my movies, I'd rather have a physical disc because it is better quality than a stream.
Yes, I've moved those.
Yes.
You say this, and you say the same thing about books, though.
Books.
You'd rather read it because the light,
Books,
hurts your
comic
eye.
books. We have physical copies of pretty much everything. I have a Kindle, but I don't know why I have a Kindle because I don't read on it.
Yeah.
It's too hard for me to read on
Yeah.
it.
So speaking of like social media and stuff, did you guys use Kickstarter or Indiegogo to fund this book?
No, we haven't. We talked about it a lot, but we don't have a name in comics. This is like the first thing we've put out there. So we kind of thought, and I don't mean this to be disparaging to anyone who started on Kickstarter. If it worked for you, that's awesome, and I'm happy for you. But we wanted to kind of earn the Kickstarter. Like we wanted to bring an audience with us.
Oh, okay.
So we put the books out ourselves first, and we're hoping that we can build our audience that way. And then for Kickstarter, like one idea we've been kicking around is our first chapter is 7 issues. Once issue 7 comes out, put them all together in a trade and add in, old drawings from 1999 and maybe some like, oh, here's how it went from pencils to inks to color to lettering, whatever. and do like a behind the scenes kind of special edition and maybe kickstart that book for people who have liked it. And it'll also give people a good jump on point for the next chapter. So that's kind of where our heads are at, but we're playing around with some ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've had guests on here, filmmakers and stuff, and I've asked this question. Do you guys think the way Kickstarter is so huge, do you believe that Kickstarter is the future, not just for comics, but just for a lot of stuff? Like people fund movies on there and just books. I mean, everything. Do you believe that's the new model that we're going to?
Probably not. You go ahead.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's going to be the end all be all, and that's going to be the only process. But I think it's just going to become more of a everyday. That's how you start out, and then eventually get to like a big movie, a studio level, but or with funding like that. But I mean, it's a very successful platform. So who knows?
I like the crowdfunding idea, and I like it more as like a, for me personally, like a pre-sale market. Like say we do the big trade issue we want to do, it's going to be ready to go out the door when we start the Kickstarter. Because I hear so many stories about like, oh yeah, I supported the thing on Kickstarter, 18 months ago. When am I going to get my book? We want people to pay for it. They'll understand the campaign has to run, but then we want to deliver on our promise or even over-deliver by really packing it full of stuff. And again, I'm not trying to disparage anybody. This is just my opinions on it.
Oh no, and we're a very honest, opinionated show here. But we've gotten quite a few things from Kickstarter. A lot of our artists and writer friends in the comic world do a lot of Kickstarters, and that's all they do. Like that is their way of publishing, and they even have like a retailer exclusive for if you have a shop and stuff, you can back the thing that way. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, it is. Like Big Dog Inc., Tom Hutchinson, he does a lot of Kickstarters. And he's how do you say, he's the man of many hats. He's like everything. He's the marketer, he's the writer, he does it all. And they just celebrated, I think, like 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, he's been like, I think 4 or 5 years on Kickstarter,
Nice.
but 10 years as a publisher.
Yeah, I mean, I might be all wrong about that approach. That was just the conversation we had before we released the first book was, well, let's put them out ourselves because we can, and we do everything between the two of us. So we're not paying a colorist or paying a penciler. So that does help keep the financial aspect of it down.
Yeah. Do you want to go into details on that process of creating the book? Like,
oh yeah, sure.
Where does it start, and walk us along?
Yeah, Mike, I feel like I've been
talking too much. So, other than, than the episodes itself, like Adam said earlier, we'll be on the phone for sometimes 2 or 3 hours a day. I'll call them up when I go for a run, and we'll just throw ideas out there, develop a storyline, develop an episode, and once we get to that episode, we'll do 3 or 4 passes through it, change some of the wording, think, well, maybe this should happen instead of this, throw this joke in there. And even while I'm drawing it, we'll still change stuff. But he'll finish the script, I'll read through it, and then I'll start doing basically storyboards or rough drafts through, page by page, panel by panel. Once I'm done with the rough draft, and I do it all digital. It's all in Photoshop. I'll do the inking. I'll send any changes that I've made to the script. I'll run it by Adam. I'll show him on the page what I'm talking about. He'll fix it in the actual written script so that we don't forget that we did it. I'll send it over to him. He'll do the coloring, and then ultimately the words or the speech bubbles, and we'll do another 4 or 5 passes before we decide, this reads well, or change this verbiage, or let's make this joke here or this joke there. And then I think after like the 16th or 17th time passing through, we're like, all right, it's done. Let's send this one out. So
yeah, we try to go as deep as we can to get the best version out there possible. And even some of the changes, it's awesome because when I'm doing the writing, it's always an idea that we both conceptualized, and I try to come up with as many jokes as I can. But sometimes I'll leave like, hey, we need a joke along these lines, and then we'll come up with something better together later. But then when Mike does the layouts and stuff, he adds in a ton of physical comedy that wasn't necessarily written, just because seeing it is so different than reading it. And I think that's where it really comes alive, because you can read a script and the dialogue and the back and forth with the characters can be funny. But if you're not seeing something funny in the comic, it's like we're wasting the medium. So to come up with some of that stuff, I think is really takes to the next level. And then a lot of times the jokes change based on that. So they're commenting on some action that wasn't necessarily written.
Is there a joke that it didn't make it in, but you kind of wish it did?
There's a lot of those actually, but it's a lot of them too that were like.
If you had to pick one, do you have one that you can tell us?
Oh.
Nothing really goes to waste, because if we cut anything out of a script, we put it in another living document that's, like basically cut scenes like for a DVD, and we'll try to insert them somewhere else later. We had some jokes that we thought were funny, but then in the context of the comic, it just falls flat, or like it's moving along, and then you read this line and you're like, wait, is that what? You get kind of falls. I can't remember exactly what the first version. In the first issue, now there's a guy that the main characters don't get along with, and he's yelling at him, and he tells them to piss off. And then Iris asks, like, hey, aren't you that kid who would piss himself every time the fire alarm went off? And we thought that was a really funny joke, but that was like the 15th version before we finally got there.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what the original version was, but it was just lame. I think it had something to do with Justin Bieber. And we're trying to do pop culture jokes, but the way I always phrase it is we don't want to do a Rise of Skywalker joke. We want to do a Star Wars joke. Because if someone reads this 3 years from now, Rise of Skywalker's not. I mean, even now, it's already 2 years old. It's not really in people's minds anymore.
And for the record, that was me in first grade. I was terrified of the fire alarm.
Well, you didn't piss yourself.
I didn't pee my pants. Not because of the fire alarm, but I did once because I was scared to ask the teacher to go to the bathroom because she was terrifying. So,
oh my God.
And Miss Medley, I'll never forget her. Miss Medley, I was so scared of that woman that I was just like, I forgot how to sign out the pass. And I was like, this is going to happen. Can't do it. I'm not asking because then she's going to yell at me. So
it's not exactly answering your question, but something else too is we try to keep it to like the equivalent of a PG-13 rating, because we are, 12, 13, 14-year-olds we hope would be reading this.
Yeah.
But we can't deny the fact that high schoolers swear altogether. So, we'll do the asterisks or the cartoon swearing kind of thing, but we try to reserve it to, like, Roy is pretty angry as a character, so we kind of try to reserve it to him, or like an extreme thing, or when it's going to really punctuate a joke but not be the joke. So there's been a couple times where we had to pull it back because it was like, oh, this is maybe a little too vulgar. And there's also a lot of times where I pull it too far back and it's just like softening all the edges. So we have to kind of find that balance.
Do you have do you have your friends that kind of are your editors, letting you know what works, what doesn't for your comic?
Yes. Yeah. We got a few buddies and family members that will run by and even just ask like, hey, if you ever remember some goofy stuff we did in high school, let us know too. Because, we can't remember everything. Like my older brother, especially, like he's just chock full of stories that he remembers. I'm like, how do you even remember that? But,
yeah.
But yeah.
And also to get the female perspective is we'll go to our wives a lot. And, in the first issue, there's that thing where the 10-year-old kid or whatever he is hitting on the two girls in a Victoria's Secret. And that's not something I would have came up with. That happened to my wife. So it's like, okay, that's going in because that's hilarious.
Oh,
that's hilarious.
So when you guys did your first issue and you physically had it in your hand, can you describe that feeling?
Goosebumps.
Yeah, it was pretty unreal.
Adam didn't tell me when he was sending it over, and one day it showed up at the mailbox, and I didn't know what it was in the envelope. And when I opened it up, I got that fuzzy feeling in my face, and no joke, goosebumps. I was like, this is so cool to see just such a polished final copy of a comic that we created. Was just like, it was unreal.
And to hold it.
Yeah.
We do it digitally. We started out on, what was it, Bristol paper?
Yeah,
and you're
Bristol
doing
boards,
actual pencils and then India
pencil
inks
and Indian ink. And then
it just wasn't feasible with being on the other side
Yeah.
of the country. Like, how do we transfer this? And we were going to do digital colors, so to scan it, but then you lose something in the scanning. So it was...
So that first episode, that first book, we drew it and redrew it and redrew it, I think 4 times.
Yeah, I think you ended up
Because
doing it
it
like
was
4
the
times.
original penciling, the inking, then I scanned it,
And tried to
touched
clean
it
it
up.
up, and then realized you had to redo it.
and then I had to just completely redo it digitally. So it was just over and over and over. But I'm glad we went with the route that we did, because it looks a lot more touched up and clean.
Yeah, and even now when we get, because we're releasing an issue a month, so when the beginning of the month comes and there's another issue, I always take a picture of the stack of comics and send it to Mike, and it's like, it's still exciting. It's, I don't know if validation's the right word, because I mean, we're paying someone to print it, they'll print anything, but it feels so good to get it.
Yeah.
So what kind of things have you guys been hearing from people that have read it?
So far, a lot of positive. Again, one of the biggest compliments I've been hearing is just people picking out the art styles and saying, "Hey, it reminded me of Doug or Recess or something like that." I loved hearing that.
And everyone has their own, which is cool.
Yeah. So, and a few friends have given good, positive, constructive criticism too, which is great. I'm not going to be like, "Oh, well, you didn't like it, so I'm not going to." It's any feedback we will take and we'll roll with it. So
yeah, luckily it's been largely positive so far.
Yeah.
We're very happy about it, and it's exciting when someone's like, "Oh, that was me in high school. I felt that. I know what you're doing." Like you were saying at the beginning of the show, it means a lot to us, because it means that the thing that we talk about on the phone and then we write, because we do have, like, my wife will read a script when it's done, or Mike's wife, but we're largely in a bubble up until it's printed. So it is cool to hear that, hey, that thing you were going for, it worked for me.
I think
means a lot.
Another compliment we got was just on the background characters, because I really wanted to capture that idea of some of us are just miserable in high school and you don't want to be there. And, if I drew droves of smiling, happy kids in the background, it'd just like, well, that's not real. Because there's usually quite a few just frowning, sad, half asleep faces that are just like, I don't want to be here. And I had someone mention that they felt like they were back in high school, looking around and seeing the students surrounding them and different heights and weights and just facial expressions and stuff like that. And
yeah,
I really
the different
thought
cliques
cool.
that people fall into. And it is fun to do the background, even though it kind of gets, we put bubbles over it and they get faded out and things like that, but it fills out the world.
Yeah, and like I said, I do like that you guys, even the attention to detail of the background characters, because sometimes the background characters just get put in there and they get lost when you're reading a comic. And you guys, they're focused but not focused, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I applaud you for that, Mike.
Oh, thank you.
Willow, you're going to say something?
I was just going to ask, do you guys keep in contact with any of your teachers that you had, and did you happen to share with them your comic?
Teachers, actually, no, which is strange. One, it's kind of a sad story, not to bring the whole thing down, but we met in Earth Science class, and that's where we hung out before we hung out. And we had a teacher, Mr. Fecho, he was a really nice guy, really cool guy. He was dorky, he was super into earth science. Of course, it's his life's work. He actually had a depression issue when they switched his medication and took his own life, which was horrible. Oh. But we would have loved to show up and give him one.
Yeah, if he was still around, it would have been an honor to hand him and say, "Hey, look, this all stems from us meeting in your class." But
because he knew that we were kind of doing this by the time we got out of high school, and it became more of us disrupting the class by laughing at each other's drawings. He kind of understood, and it was kind of a friendly relationship. So that would have been really nice. it's unfortunate how it turned out.
Yeah.
On kind of a funny note, though, all of the art classes I ever took in high school, I actually came dangerously close to failing because I wanted to just draw comics and cartoons, and they're like, well, draw this apple. I'm like, I don't want to draw the apple. And they're like, well, knit this coin purse. I'm like, I don't want to knit a coin purse, So I ended up the last month of every semester, I'd end up having to do 15 projects just to pass. But I actually almost failed quite a few of those classes. So oddly enough.
I would have rather took art class than band class, quite honestly.
True. Yeah. I can't play an instrument. Every time I moved, I missed the recorder class, and I think my parents are pretty happy about that.
Oh,
so,
yes.
I think it's a good thing.
My mom is equally happy because I'm a girl, but I think when you think about when you were in high school, when you talk about the teachers, I always think it's kind of funny that before I became a teacher, I knew they were real people, but I didn't really understand that they did have lives and other interests outside of the classroom because it was the only place I ever saw them.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you graduated, and I didn't stay in my hometown for very long, but if you saw them out somewhere and they didn't look like they did usually in class, it was always strange to see that they had these whole different personalities. And I was like, that's what I guess I try to do with my kids, is that I'm a whole nother, like, there's a whole side of me that you don't see in the classroom. Like, I am the biggest, I'm the biggest nerd you'll ever meet, but like, I'm definitely a geek girl. And so my kids are kind of realizing that. So if they have something they can tailor a conversation with me with, they'll have a conversation that they wouldn't probably normally have had a conversation with me about, which I think is fun, because when I was in school, I didn't want to talk to my 60-year-old stuffy teachers. Like, I didn't know what to say to them.
Well, we are paying homage to quite a few teachers that we actually had.
Good.
It may not be them depicted exactly, but a lot of the personalities and stuff. So, we did have a lot of teachers who were encouraging, but also very strict, because if they saw potential in somebody, they wanted to push you. So we do mention and pay homage to as many of those teachers as we can, because without them, we might not even be in the position we're in. So
yeah, when we first started, we had a lot more ideas where it would be a lot more interaction with the teachers in the school, but just the way where we already have a handful of main characters to service in a 22-page issue, a lot of the stuff, the longer conversations with the teachers kind of went by the side just for the nature of the story. But we do have at least a handful that'll show up pretty regularly. Like the art teacher is based on an art teacher that Mike had, and he's big in Turner's trajectory. So,
Mike, when you are drawing this up, do you put in little Easter eggs that only Adam would know? Like maybe like in a tree, or like just something in the background?
Not just that Adam would know, but you may see little references to old 90s cartoons floating around in the backgrounds of a lot of the episodes. So something to kind of keep an eye out for.
But we also do put we try not to do inside jokes as like what the characters are saying, because then no one else is going to get it. But there'll be little subtle things that, like, I write something in a script that I know is going to be a home run for Mike, even though it doesn't really matter to the overall story, things like that.
So what would your younger selves think about where you guys are right now?
I wouldn't believe it, but if I had to tell my younger self anything, it would just be because a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate, but when you're into art and you're into drawing and you're into comics and you try to recreate stuff that inspires you and you have trouble getting to, I know a lot of people have trouble just doing hands, and it's very frustrating, and you want to give up on it after a while and just draw circles where the hand should be. But best thing I would say is just keep practicing, and one day you're going to accidentally draw it the way you want it to, and you're going to be like, oh, that's how I do it now. So just keep sticking with it and take inspiration where you can get it, and just practice. It's make it fun. Don't make it a chore.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the exact same page. Just instead of drawing, it would be with writing, where it's like, just write. Like if you think the thing that you wrote sucks, it's like you just got to work it out, and then the next one will be better, and the next one will be better. Just do it. And also read. I only read what I had to for school, and I didn't actually like read for enjoyment till like my mid-20s. But that really sharpens your brain and tells you how to tell a story.
Yeah, I barely read the ones that I had to read too, and that was bad. I got to read
Yeah, it was
more.
Cliff Notes.
Yeah.
I only read the stuff I wanted to read.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of like Mike. He only drew what he wanted to draw.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah,
Well,
I didn't want to draw the fruit.
I only ever wrote the stuff I wanted to write too. So like the hardest part I think about writing, because that was my thing, was trying to fit into somebody else's box. Well, write this or write that. Here's an 87-page thesis you have to write. I'm like, like, why? I don't want to. Like, I want dialogue and characters and tell a story and have fun.
Yep.
It wasn't the most creative writing, but I had a few classes that were not writing centric, where I talked the teacher into letting me write a paper instead of making up another project so I could actually pass. Like that's how I got through macroeconomics.
Oh, wow.
I cannot do math, but I can write. So
I think I got through most of my classes by asking the teacher if I could just draw something for extra credit to make it through. So.
I wish I had that creativity to talk my way out of doing something I don't want to do. I did it when I was with my foster parents, like to get out of grounding, but I couldn't do it with any of my teachers.
I usually did what the teachers told me to do. I just, Jesus Christ.
Squirrel.
So, Mike, when did the whole SWAT thing come like that you wanted to be a police officer? When did that start for you?
To be honest, it's something I always thought I was going to do all the way when I was a kid. Because right out of high school, I joined the Marines, and like that was another big inspiration. Not to get too deep and sad story, but we lost a family member in 9/11. So my older brother joined, I joined, my sister joined. She's married to a Marine. My youngest sister's married to a Marine as well, who's also an officer now. My older brother's a cop in New York City. My younger brother's a cop in Florida. My dad was a customs special agent. All my aunts and uncles are either firefighters, cops, or heavy drinkers, either way, but sometimes both. But
those things go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's kind of like a family business, and I thought for sure by 2003 we'd have M41A pulse rifles in the Marine Corps, but that didn't happen. But I joined the Marines specifically too because I loved aliens. So I was like, Colonial Marines, it's going to happen one day. Didn't happen. But
what did you do in the Marines?
I was in the infantry.
Oh. Okay.
So I did a 4-year enlistment. Did one peacekeeping tour down in Haiti, and then 2 combat tours in Iraq.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So got out and got into the police department 2 years after I got out, and the SWAT thing, I've always loved gear and the tactical side of stuff, and that was always something I was drawn to. So
that's really cool, and it's men and women like Mike that we can have shows like this, and you guys can create comics and stuff. So I mean, thank you for your service.
Oh, no worries, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. No problem. No problem.
Yeah.
Because our freedom wasn't free.
That's right. So what about you, Adam? Outside of the comic thing, what do you do?
My day job, I'm a web designer.
Nice.
I work for a company that does software systems for like hospitals and universities. I just try to make all the software look pretty. I can't make it function, but I can make it look good.
Well, is web designing something that you wanted to get into? Is that
that kind of, I didn't know what to do after high school. I went to a community college just to bang out all the gen eds and stuff because I wasn't sure. And then I found web design because I wanted to do something creative, but I'm not like a natural born artist. Like I can't draw our comic. I can't even hold a candle to Mike's work. But I want to do something creative and design-wise that wasn't art school, and web design seemed like the perfect blend of everything, and plus who doesn't have a website? So it seemed like a home run. The only mistake I made there was I went to a private school, so anyone listening who's looking at college, go to a state school. Save yourself 60 grand.
Yep.
Yeah, so web design's been good. And I also flip houses on the side because I like working in web design because it's a good job. But at the end of the day, you don't feel like you did much, where when you fix up a dumpy house, at the end of an 8-hour day, there's 8 hours of progress, or at least ideally.
So working in the trades wasn't your idea fun at all?
What do you mean?
Like you flip houses. Do you actually do like the floor and the drywall stuff?
I do everything but the HVAC system.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and that was never something that was part of my plan either. My dad ended up working for a guy who had a audio video company, and he made all of his money in real estate. And he went from borrowing money from his parents at 18 to buy an apartment building to, I think it was 24 when he made his first $1 million.
Oh, wow.
So he's like, hey, I'll show you how to do this. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stick with you. And I'm unfortunately not a millionaire, but it's been good. Like I, managed to pay down my student loans and things like that. So it's a lot of work, but it's good. And it feels good to work with your hands, as exhausting as it can be.
Yeah, I tried to hang a picture once and drilled into my toilet's drainage pipe. So that's about as far as my carpentry goes.
So you guys definitely complement each other, like where, one can't, there you go.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we make a good team. And it's funny, too, because we're a lot of times on the same page where, like just the other day, we went over the latest script that I wrote. And as we were getting up to the end, Mike was like, oh, hey, we should do this and it should end like this and you should say that. And I'm like, well, let me read it because it's about 95% exactly what you just said. So it makes it easy to work with each other because we've never had an argument over like, no, that wouldn't work there.
Is there a real life issue that's very relevant that you want to tackle in this book, but you kind of, what's the word I'm maybe hesitant on?
I guess it's just really more what can we do to keep it within that PG rating, because there's, especially being an officer, there's a lot of things that I've seen and people go through that I'm like, well, this would be a good idea, but we're talking about some pretty serious stuff that, yes, it happens in high school, but it's like, do we want to go that deep down the rabbit hole, or do we want to keep this lighter? You know what I mean? It's kind of tough. So
there's some stuff because we're trying to be very honest in it, where it is partly autobiographical. So we have to try to look at ourselves objectively and like where we screwed up, we want to put that in and things like that. And we do have some more serious storylines down the line. Like one character, starts drinking pretty heavily after some things go wrong in his life. And without it being like an ABC after school special, we want to jump on that. Not that Mike or I ever had that, but we had friends who fell pretty hard. So there is some more serious stuff. And I don't know if there's anything that we're like, oh, we want to, but we got to stay away from it. So I don't know if I answered your question.
I hear you.
Well, it's kind of like what you brought up earlier too, like where even the popular kids have problems. And I can tell you a quick story is a gal I work with, we were on patrol and we found a girl in an alley, just a mess, homeless, pockmarks on her face from drug use and all that. And we got done giving her some, resources, things like that. And as we're walking away, she looks at me, she says, I know that girl. I said, how do you know her? She goes, she was like one of the most popular high school cheerleaders I went to school with. I was like, just goes to show, people are dealing with their own problems and they don't always deal with it in the right way. And things can take a very serious turn for the worse, and it's awful to see them fall into that type of lifestyle. But it's there are some aspects that, yes, we would love to tackle them, but it's is this the proper platform for it? Maybe not, but they're out there. There's plenty of those issues. So
at some point, maybe they'll organically grow into something.
It very well could. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Especially as the characters get older, we can start, at 14 years old, they're concerned about, what's the next Marvel movie coming out and who's at the arcade. It's not too serious. But as they get older, we want to get into some real life stuff without going too dark or too heavy.
I tell my 8th graders, I'm like, I know you do it or that you know about it, but in my happy little planet that I live in and I like it there, you don't, and you know nothing about it, and I have to live there. Like that's where I have to live to be okay. Mm-hmm. But I know that they see some crap and that they do crap that I wouldn't be okay with if it was my child. But mm-hmm. I'm tying it. Chill out. What?
Why are you so slow?
Mike, you said you joined the Marines and hoping that you would have some firepower that they had in Aliens. Which it never happened. So let's jump into a little pop culture here. What were some of your favorite movies? I mean, besides Aliens.
Besides the Predator movies as well, because those were always awesome. Willow was one of my favorites growing up. I always like those creepy Jim Henson ones, like the Dark Crystal and all that too, which still give me nightmares because I don't know how kids watch that and they're like, "Oh, this is cool." That was terrifying. But Labyrinth, things like that. And then once I hit around middle school, we start getting to Starship Troopers, things like that. All those movies, not the second or third one, the first one.
There's only one.
There's only one as far as I'm concerned. But anything sci-fi like that, I always love those.
Hey, the TV show was awesome, by the way.
Which one? The Starship Troopers?
The Roughnecks.
Yeah, that was
the animated one.
They did a good job with that.
What I was gonna say, Mike. What about The Crow? Did you like The Crow?
You know what? I saw that when I was probably too young to appreciate it, and I have to rewatch it because I don't think I've seen it since.
I cut my teeth pretty early on that one. But there's something about the style of storytelling that you don't get a whole lot of when you see it when you're 18 and you're like, okay. And then you see it when you're 30 and you're like, oh,
yeah,
I got that.
Yeah.
What about you, Adam?
Star Wars was probably the biggest thing for me, which I'm sure, that's not a unique story at all. I used to rewatch the Back to the Future. Well, I still watch them regularly, but Back to the Future was a big one growing up. Anything in that kind of 50s, 60s, Americana time frame, I really like a lot. Indiana Jones, of course, all the big ones. I'm trying to think of anything more obscure that I was really into as a kid. I mean, as a kid, Ninja Turtles was huge. That was even predating Star Wars for me. I'm looking around at my movie collection to try to pick one out because I'm blanking. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a huge one.
That was
I probably watched it every other week.
That was kind of the first of its kind.
Yeah,
live action. I mean, Song of the South did it, but the way that they did it, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was
in defense too. There's a whole different Who Framed Roger Rabbit wasn't for kids.
No.
It really wasn't. You could go and see it when you were a kid and you're like, oh, ha, 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 because everybody else is laughing. And then you're like, oh.
Well, it's kind of like how they explain Pixar films. Pixar films are not kids' movies. They're family films with kid.
That everybody can watch and understand.
Yeah, they're movies that are kid-friendly, yeah. Yeah, that's how, and I like it. It's kind of like the Bill Watterson thing where you watch it and every year when you're older, you get something different out of it, so it grows with you.
And one more I got to add to the list, though, is The Brave Little Toaster. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one.
Yes.
That movie ruined me for life because it taught me to feel for inanimate objects. And ever since then, I'm like, I can't throw this toaster away. It still sort of works. It's got feelings. I can't do this. But love that animation back then too.
Yeah, and then like Land Before Time and The Secret of Nim.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Dino Riders. I don't know if you guys ever remember that.
Dino Riders. Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've seen The Secret of Nim. Like,
that's real dark.
And it is. Like, you don't realize how scary it is until you're like older, and you're like, I watched this when I was 6.
Yeah. I mean, and that's Don Bluth, who was a former Disney animator who went on and did those, and of course he did like Fievel.
He did Fievel.
American was a good one.
Oh, another great one. Yeah,
that movie I cry still to this day.
I feel, Nicole, I feel like that about Rescuers Down Under, where it's like, this is terrifying for a child. Who's letting their kid watch this?
Well, and the things that I shouldn't have watched, but I watched, like, just happened to be on TV. If I happened to, accidentally turn the TV on too late, was like, I Will Forever Be Ruined by Tim Curry's It. I will always be ruined by his Pennywise. Like, I know when I was 6 years old, I was not in the mind frame. I was a chicken, still am. But I don't know why did anybody allow me to watch that? Like, who was not watching me to allow me to watch a clown that turned
should have been
back?
Supervised. What was going on?
Totally. Like, one of the first horror movies that I watched was Nightmare on Elm Street and like any of the Chucky movies, like Child's Play and stuff. So I think back and like even like some of the more obscure horror movies, I'm just like, what was my mom thinking? Oh yeah, she wasn't around to make sure we weren't doing crap. So
my
mom was around. The TV babysat us, so like a lot of the TV stuff we watched was probably not stuff I should have been watching. But in my defense too, like I used to fall asleep with my dad on the couch. And so if I fell asleep with my dad on the couch when I was 4 and 5 years old, if the TV was still on back then late at night, they'd play those horror movies. And so I remember waking up one night and Ghoulies was on, and the damn thing came out of the toilet. I would go to the bathroom by myself for weeks.
Yeah,
I still love the people under the stairs story.
I don't know how many times I've told this story.
Yeah, but Mike and Adam have never heard.
So this is how much of a chicken I am. So I was 11. Okay, I was 11. This is really bad. So I was 11 and we saw people under the stairs, and I didn't really get why it was so scary, but there's a jump scare when his feet are dangling and the people that are inside the walls grab him and like it pops up. And so there's like all these times you hear stuff in the walls of this house. And we all watched it together, like 4 of us, my sister, me, and my mom's boyfriend's kids at the time, I think. And we went to bed that night, and I kept hearing this scraping on my wall. And it was like serious, like, and I'm like, Danielle, do you hear that? She's like, what? And I'm like, there's something under the bed. There's nothing under the bed. And I'm like, there's something under the bed. And so finally she heard it, and she's like, there's something under the bed. And so we flipped the light on, and we're looking under the bed. It's the damn hamster. It's chewing on the wall underneath the bed. So it's like, and because it was so quiet, we heard it. And I don't know if my sister laughed at it as much as I do now, because I really was a chicken. I really am a chicken. And so we laugh about it now too, but I don't think she laughs as I do. I was, more of a chicken than she was, but it was hilarious. So I'm like, it's the freaking hamster, because we didn't even notice it gotten out of the cage.
Well, I jump scare very easily, and unfortunately, the guys I work with figured that out too. So, they'll walk ahead of me, and I'm sitting there on my
Why
phone.
do they think it's funny?
They film it, so it's probably going to be played at some sort of presentation at some point.
You poor guy.
Compilation of me just, but yeah.
My husband is he loves to scare me, and I don't find it funny at all. I get really mad, and like I grew up with my sister scaring me all the time too, so it's like I'm easily razzled.
Well, I have to make an effort to scare my wife. I do. I'll hide around the corner and scare her. She is so light on her feet that I can never hear her coming, and she just appear behind me, and I'll jump through the roof. It's terrifying.
My husband's like that too. He'll just like, it's almost like he'll appear out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I'm like, where the heck did you come from?
Oh, it's terrifying.
I think the children have learned better. Because I'm a little bit more violent.
You jump scare puncher.
I'll stop you. I think I hit you a couple times too.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
The one time he did scare the hell out of me, and I thought I was going to fall out of the shower, which was not funny.
Oh, I got a story. We lived in Vegas.
So mean. Don't tell this story.
So we went to the movie and saw the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, and it was a late night show. So we were coming out of the casino and going into the parking garage, and this motorcycle, and like there was not a lot of cars there on that level. So this motorcycle starts up, and she thinks it's a chainsaw.
It sounded like a chainsaw, damn it.
And she goes running to the car. It was hilarious.
That's awesome.
He's sitting there laughing at me, and I'm crying because he's like, it's a motorcycle, and I'm like, but it sounds like a chainsaw. I can't find my keys. I can't get in the car. He thinks it's hilarious. Still to this day, he still thinks it's hilarious. But seriously, there's lots of stories that I could tell. There's probably going to be a compilation of that someday too.
My husband won't watch horror movies with me. I watched The Grudge with him, and that was the last movie he watched with me.
I scared my squad leader from that movie in Iraq. I was making that little noise that she makes over the radio, and he showed up at my post ready to throw hands. I was like, dude, it's just a joke. Relax.
Gotta do something to entertain yourself out there.
Oh, yeah.
It's not fun when you're alone, man. Like, I am really, like, I love scary movies, and I love scary everything, and I love paranormal shows where they do all that behind the scenes and all that stuff. But no. Like, it's not funny when it's you.
No.
So, since we do cover TV shows,
Don't tell the other story.
I'm not going to tell you. No. Since we cover television on this podcast as well, do you guys have any favorite TV shows growing up that are not cartoons that you remember?
Growing up was mostly anything on Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
Are You Afraid of the Dark? I really liked Kenan and Kel when that was on.
Yeah. Funny thing is, I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of stuff like Ren and Stimpy and Beavis and Butthead, like off limits. I wasn't allowed to watch it, so we'd have to sneak it when we were at like a friend's house or something.
Yeah,
which is funny because when you look at Rocko's Modern Life, there's a lot of stuff in there. You're like, oh man, I didn't get that as a kid, but that's way over my head. But
yeah.
But yeah, generally speaking, it's just like kind of Adam said. It was mostly Nickelodeon shows, things like that. But yeah, I can't think of. I mean, you know what? I probably started liking Seinfeld when I was too young. I thought that show was funny, but I still do. I still watch it. But
Soup Nazi.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, movies and TV shows are different from that era, I think, because there's not many. I can't think of a TV show that I'd put on like tonight that I watched when I was 12. But I watched Back to the Future, something like that. It's weird how it's a little different. Maybe it's just a matter of access.
Friends, I still sit down and watch, even though sometimes it drives me nuts. But if it's on, I'll just. We were a little older when that started. Yeah, I'd say.
That was probably late 90s.
Middle school.
We were in our 20s probably when that started.
What?
Oh no!
Oh, Friends.
I was in high school.
We were teenagers.
That's why it was more funny when I was 20 something. It was like, oh, I get that now.
Yeah.
Often I will watch shows with my husband. Like we we're kind of rewatching Star Trek as we like periodically, and I used to be a huge Deep Space Nine fan in the 90s, and now it's like I wasn't a huge fan of Voyager, but now I appreciate it more. And I'm just like, you definitely like shows like Night Court, Seinfeld. You definitely appreciate that stuff later on in life because you finally understand the jokes.
Oh yeah, the Seinfeld
those are relevant too, right? They stay relevant, so it's still pretty normal for a 30-something to feel that way, or a 20-something to feel that way. So when you see it when you're 20-something, you're like, "Huh, yeah, totally get that."
So I was thinking this, and it just kind of popped in my head. I could totally see you guys doing an issue of social studies in the vein of like The Office or Modern Family.
Oh yeah.
We do have a camera confessional one planned where one of them's doing a film and video project for school. Sorry, she's telling me I've been in here.
I just think it would work so well with your characters.
I think we can definitely get that in there. I think we'll have a lot of fun when it gets to that point too.
Yeah, we have one where Turner's doing we don't have it, but we have an idea where Turner's doing a film and video project because I took film and video in high school, and he would be the perfect one to just put it in your face and completely intrude on everything you're doing where he shouldn't be there.
Yeah. So did you guys watch WandaVision? And if so, what did you guys think of it?
I've not seen it yet.
I did, and I loved it. I loved everything they did with it. They nailed and I really didn't like Scarlet Witch, and I don't think Elizabeth Olsen's a very good actress, but she killed it in that show. The development they gave her character and everything.
Yeah.
Are you looking forward to Falcon and Winter Soldier next week?
I am. I don't think it's going to be as good as WandaVision. I know it's a completely different animal, but I think it's going to be more buddy cop instead of being like this whole psychological break.
It'll be fun still, though. Because
it might be a nice palate cleanser without being so heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, what are you guys like watching? Like, if you could give me like 5, what things are you guys watching right now when you have time?
So my wife actually has been on a kick of getting through as many series of stuff that she could possibly get through, and so I end up watching a lot of it over her shoulder and end up getting into it either way. But I just watched Your Honor, Imposters, a show off of Netflix called Fauda. There's 3 seasons. And then what else have I seen? Obviously The Mandalorian, but I keep rewatching it. But was that 4? And then whatever's on TV. I'm gonna have to just say that.
What about you, Ed? What are you watching lately?
I've been rewatching. I never finished the last 2 seasons, and my wife hadn't seen any of it, so we were watching Vikings. It was on History, then Amazon bought the rights.
Yeah.
WandaVision, obviously. That's
my favorite wrestler in it.
Yeah, Nicole wants to watch Vikings because it has Edge.
Copeland in it.
Adam Copeland is in it.
I'm not sure who he is.
We're wrestling fans.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I could see a lot of wrestlers getting work on that show because they need a lot of giant dudes to throw axes. So. I was rewatching Rome on HBO because I love ancient Rome, and that show, it's like the best show that got screwed up the worst. I don't know. I watch a lot of stuff. Mad Men I always rewatch. That's one of those shows that when I hit a creative slump, I watch it. Not that I want to make anything remotely like it, but it's just so well done and low key for what it is that it always makes me want to do something.
All the talk
You're talking for too long.
The original run of The Twilight Zone is something that I rewatch just constantly. If like a week goes by and I don't see an episode, it's odd.
Do you ever feel like the Twilight Zone is way too relatable now in life?
Yeah, well, it was started in 1959, and you can still find the correlations. It's crazy.
Do you have a favorite Twilight Zone episode?
I don't remember the name of it, but there's the one where the couple wakes up in the town and they were like hungover or something from the night before, and no one in the town is real. Like they go up, even a squirrel falls out of a tree. Like nothing is real in the town, and they're basically in a terrarium.
Yeah,
That's how it turns out. Yeah, I like the ones where they do the small town life from the 50s. It's like a snapshot of that point in time. And I guess that's why I like Mad Men so much, because it started in like 1962 or something.
Yeah, and then you mentioned that you watched Rome. Did you watch Spartacus?
Oh yeah, I love
I've seen
Spartacus.
Spartacus.
Yeah,
We probably rewatch that every year too, me and my wife.
yeah. It was a great series, and tragic that the lead actor had passed away from
I know.
cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever watch that documentary on Netflix about him?
I did not yet. I have not seen it.
It's really, really good, but it's like the saddest thing ever. You feel like you lose a family member by the time the thing's over with, and even though you only knew the guy from one show, it's really well done.
I won't be watching that.
Yeah, just miss cry a lot.
Okay. Well, you know what? Y'all made me catch shit for this. Like, I cried. I've cried in every episode of This Is Us. I cried in every episode of Million Little Things. I cried at Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. I cry over everything. So the one time that I don't cry, everybody is after me. It's that episode of The Mandalorian when the child reaches up and they have to say goodbye, but I didn't cry. He's like, you didn't cry, you're heartless. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm totally happy.
Did WandaVision get you?
Yep.
Yeah, that last episode, yeah.
The last episode and the one before that, when he says grief is what is grief if not love persevering? And I was done. Like
the whole internet was done at that point.
Yeah, I think you were not alone there.
But I think I cried before that. I think I cried before that in the show, just out of the sheer reminiscence. It was
the whole show was her dealing with loss, so the whole show was really depressing.
But it was really nice to see that kind of TV come back.
Yeah,
I grew up on reruns of I Love Lucy and Bewitched, so to have that as like the first 3 episodes, I was just like, oh, I love this. And that kind of comedy, they don't have that kind of comedy anymore. It's hokey and it's silly, but
I love slapstick.
It's just fun.
It's pure.
Yeah, there's something there's no innuendo. There's just that sheer joy. I miss Mayberry. Anyways, it's things weren't so serious back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mike, is there because you're a police officer and you were in the military, is there a show that you absolutely love that's cop or military related?
Yeah. It's kind of older one, but have you ever seen Southland?
Yes. I heard about it. Yes.
I think they did. That's probably the closest I've seen in terms of an actual cop show that they really nailed it. In terms of the banter, the way things are, obviously, when there's shootouts, you're usually on admin leave for a month. It's not okay. You're clear. You're back to work the next day. But it's like you said earlier. They're trying to do this in a half hour or hour, so you can't really do that. But Southland, they did a really good job with. End of Watch, they did a great job with, because I think Gyllenhaal and the other guy they rode with LAPD for a couple of weeks to get the banter down, and and it really shows. They really captured it well. And if I had to suggest in terms of the military, Generation Kill, the HBO series, if you haven't seen that, it's got to be the most accurate depiction of life in the Marine Corps for a grunt during a deployment that you can possibly get.
Okay.
It's not really it's not like an over-the-top action. It's more down to the sheer banter and the boredom of a deployment mixed with short bursts of adrenaline and terror, so they did a really good job portraying that in that show. So check that one out if you have a chance.
Yeah.
So let me ask the same question, but the opposite. Is there something that you see that just makes you want to be like, no?
Yeah.
All the rest of it.
All the rest of it.
Chicago PD, whilst it's wildly entertaining, and you can tell they kind of did their research, so they'll get some of the word and the phrases down. They just kind of like use it inappropriately. And then, they have like their torture chamber in the basements like that. It doesn't exist. And maybe somewhere, I don't know, but not where I work. But, and then you might catch some shit for this, but one of the worst military films I've seen in terms of realism was Hurt Locker. I know it won a bunch of awards, but if you were ever actually in and went on a deployment, that was so over the top Hollywoodized nonsense. It's like when I watched it, I expected a lot more. I was like, what am I watching here? This is ridiculous.
I remember you calling me after, and you're like, "Why was a bomb technician running down an alleyway with a handgun?" Like,
yeah, and all of a sudden he's a sniper, and it's like, come on, man. The EOD guys, like, yeah, I'm sure there's one or two out there who are pretty well versed all around, but that's just, it was so over the top. It was ridiculous. But yeah, I'd have to say that's probably the most nonsensical one.
I think my husband would.
What's that?
I said I think my husband would agree with you on your choices, because he's huge into like military movies, and
awesome. Yeah.
I'm the cop show lover,
and they're great. Cop shows are always great. They're entertaining. You just like, the only problem is it creates kind of that false sense of like, oh, why didn't they shoot the gun out of his hand thing? Because a lot of the shows they'll do that, or shoot him in the leg or whatever. But and two, it's just like the interrogation rooms, like. We're not hitting people with phone books to get confessions. Like, maybe that happened in the past, but it's just like you don't do that anymore. That you can't go to court and say, yeah, he confessed. Like, well, what'd you do? Well, I hit him with a phone book till he said he did it. It's like, no, that's just not how it is.
More pretty boring, right?
What's that?
The interrogation room is more boring.
It's fascinating. It's just not exciting. You know what I mean? Like, if you watch, if you ever got to sit in on like a homicide detective, or even like an ICAC, like Internet Crimes Against Children, which I think is one of the most honorable jobs on the department. I don't know how anyone can do it, because you have to deal with just truly the worst human beings on the face of the earth. The worst. I can understand people getting violent with each other, but when it comes to the horrible things that they do to kids, it's like, I couldn't sit across the table and I'd be twitching the whole time. Like, I got to strangle this guy. But if you're ever able to sit on an interview and see how they interact with these guys and create a rapport within an hour and end up getting a voluntary confession, it's amazing to see how they can do it. It's very fascinating. Just, I don't know how those guys do it. It's super difficult, because it's just the nature of the crime is so horrible. But
the last episode of The Walking Dead that I watched is the day that Judith was born.
Oh, really?
I was done.
Yeah.
I was like, can't.
Yeah. I really wanted zombie baby.
I didn't.
Sorry, I'm kind of heartless.
I didn't, but also anything that has to do with kids, like, I've still not seen The Omen all the way through. Anything with kids, I'm pretty much.
Yeah, it's rough. It's very rough. That's got to be the worst part of my job, is seeing kids hurt or injured or in trouble. That's the biggest issue I have with it. But
no, go ahead.
Is there a story from your job that something had happened that you're very proud of, that you were involved in? I mean, I know that a lot of bad things, went in the comic and stuff like that, but is there something that you can share that?
I mean, there's so many, like, just to put it in perspective, in Seattle, we have, and this is not including just social contacts we have with people, but we have over almost 500,000 calls for service a year. That's someone dialing non-emergency or 911. Easy, Libby. And out of those 500,000, I mean, it's a fraction of a percentage that end up in us actually using force or having to do something. But out of all of them, recently, I would say, there was a stabbing down in the Soto district. It's kind of where the stadiums are, and my partner and I had gotten there. And it was a homeless guy in an alley. I don't know whether it was just an argument or if it was over drugs or whatever, but he ended up getting stabbed with a box cutter right here, which is actually a main artery.
Oh, wow.
So I had just gone through a 4-day class on operational medicine, which is how to treat trauma on the scene. So I ended up sticking a finger in his neck and cutting off the artery. And basically held the pressure there till the fire department came. He was so drunk he threw up on me while I was holding the pressure. But the fire department said that had we not located the wound and held the pressure, he would have bled out before they got there. So probably one of my favorite moments. And in fact, even more recently, I got one more story, and this is, just goes to show, like, I don't want to get too political here, but nobody hates a bad cop worse than a good cop. And speaking of the internet crimes against children, we had a detective talking to a suspect who expressed interest in offending against children. And essentially she was playing the part of a mom who was offering up her children, because that's apparently a thing that exists. He was actually a commissioned. He was a commissioned commercial vehicle enforcement officer. So when he showed up to the meeting, me and several other SWAT guys were hiding in a hotel room waiting for him. And he walked into the room and we arrested him. And, it's one of the most satisfying arrests I've had on my career, because that was a bad dude who was in a position of authority, who had no reason to be in that position of authority. So definitely one of my most proud arrests I've made thus far.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And I think he did the nail on the head where good cops don't like bad cops, like, because it gives you guys all a bad name. And I love cops. I mean, out of all the bad ones, it's like 1%.
Yeah, and not everybody does, and that's okay, But it's tough being painted under the broad brush. But at the same time, like, I get it, and like I said, really, when I see somebody do something terrible on a video, I'm like, nothing makes me more angry than the fact that it's like, you knew not to do that, because you're not just putting your own career at risk. You're making the jobs of every cop in the entire country harder. In the day and age of YouTube and videos, everyone's going to see it. Someone's going to see it. So why would you go out of your way and do something stupid? And now the rest of us have to deal with the fallout, because we're all seen as that's what all of us do. So it's rough, but do what you can.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. Teachers included.
So not even joking. So I was in college studying when Mary Kay Letourneau was a thing.
Yeah.
And I said, this woman just made it harder for everybody else.
Yep.
Like, because the only thing that anybody's ever going to see is a 20-something in a classroom with a bunch of 13-year-old boys. Yep. Like that's what makes everybody that much harder. And then there was a TV show. What's it called? A Teacher?
Yeah, on FX.
With
a great show. Kate Mara and
Nate
Robinson, who was in Love, Simon. It's a really good show.
It's a good show, but I cringed every single time, because I'm like, do better. Like, and she did. She baited him, and she made him. I'm like, why would you do that? Like,
I'll never understand it.
Ooh, creeps me out.
Yeah,
but like I said, I appreciate that you served in the military and
no worries
in the streets of Seattle. I appreciate your comic, and I want to see it succeed. So I'm going to be following you guys for as long as you guys are around.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So where can people find you guys on social media?
We're on all the major platforms. It's Social Studies Comic on Facebook, and it's Social Studies CB on Twitter. And I don't remember which one it is on Instagram. I don't remember what their rules are, but it's either Social Studies Comic or Social Studies CB if it wouldn't take the full name. We have the Snapchat, but I don't really know what Snapchat is, so we have yet to use it. And we have socialstudiescomic.com.
Okay, and you said people can get you guys on Comixology?
Yep, we're on Comixology. Issue 3 just got accepted this morning, actually, because they have a whole approval process. And I'm working on getting us on Comixology Unlimited. So if you already subscribe, our stuff's included. But there's a lot more hoops to jump through. Sorry.
It's okay. My cats are already starting to be little schmucks right now. I have one jumping up on the counter already. So
appreciate you guys having us for real.
Yeah, definitely.
No problem.
We love all kinds of guests to hear stories like that you share, Mike. And
I've got millions of them, unfortunately. Some funny, some horrible, some great, but never-ending supply.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing some of them. And
Sure, anytime.
Yeah, and Willow she actually has her own show called Willow Talk, where she gets more
in depth and
yeah.
I like talking about social issues because it's very important, and it's because I grew up in foster care that a lot of stuff isn't actually talked about, and it's it's just a world that I'm sure you've seen, the downfall of, society. And it's like constant. I keep hearing stories of people in and out of foster care. And, unfortunately, I struggled very hard trying to keep myself from, living on the streets and becoming one of those statistics. And and I will never ever go in that direction. Good. So, and I'm trying to keep my family straight. But
well, keep in touch. If you ever want me on, I'd be happy to jump on.
Yeah.
We can talk about that stuff for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, until next week, it's time to ring the bell.